So a pre-approval or a pre-qualification is taking basic information, putting it through an automated system, and it just says, hey, you kind of meet the parameters. But the challenge with that is, with a conditional approval, we do the digging. We collect pay stubs. We could contact the employer for verifications on things. We get 6 months of bank statements and make sure you don't have a ton of non-sufficient fund charges or big deposits that we can't explain because you had money in the backyard you deposited. That conditional underwriting takes a lot of that off the table.
Good morning. Today, my guest is Jonathan Robert. He's the branch manager for New American Funding in Birmingham, Alabama, specializing in custom mortgage solutions for first-time home buyers, veterans, and clients seeking 100% financing. A former chef, he ranks as a top mortgage originator nationwide, according to the Scotsman's Guide, and has been recognized as a top lender for the Alabama Housing Finance Authority's StepUp program. Good morning and welcome to you, Jonathan.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you and to meet someone that likes to cook.
Telling you, it kind of transcends all careers, right?
It does. It does. Well, we'll have to compare skills sometime and do a cookout and bring in some clients.
Well, I'm happy to do it. I don't know if I can compete, but I'm willing to try.
Oh, I'm sure you can. Now, I grew up in South Alabama, so our taste buds will be similar.
I say a lot of similarities along the coast.
Yeah, that's right. So let's jump right in because I don't want to take up all your day. Let's talk about your journey. How did transitioning from a chef to a top originator happen, and how does the background help you connect with real estate pros today?
Well, not too exciting a story. Did a lot of time in food service most of my career and had a daughter, and she's 23 now, and just didn't want to be away from family. So I had to find a different avenue, a different way to do it, and not a lot of education in other areas, and found that mortgage origination, kind of like real estate, is a relational career. So had some friends that were in it and just kind of learned quickly, as long as your communication skills are good and you have an attention to detail and don't mind working long hours, which are all skills from the restaurant industry, it's a pretty easy transition. So I had a friend that just kind of got me in the door. My wife encouraged me and did that, 2005 or six. And I went through the crash with the real estate industry and everything else, and just kind of managed to build a good business, do a lot of business out in Jasper. But just learn, as long as you take care of your people, you're upfront and honest with them, take care of your real estate agents and your referral partners, it's a great career, and you can kind of, manage to weather the storm no matter what the environment is.
Right. Well, it's so good to hear you say that. So many people that are getting into mortgage lending now do not realize that the realtor really needs a connection with them, and that they need to back them up. I
Absolutely.
just had a closing last week that I did not know the lender. So they didn't, I had the seller. Okay. So they didn't communicate with us well. And then on top of that, the closing attorney was a problem. And that's never a good sign.
Nah, when 2 out of the 3 don't play well, that makes it hard.
Yeah. So it's good when I have other lenders that I have a wonderful relationship with, and it makes all the difference in the world in a smooth closing.
It really does. And I mean, it's honesty, it's communication, it's knowing the expectations. And so with a lot of what we do in my team, it's trying to do as much of the heavy lifting and hard work on the front end as possible. So we're not one of those lenders that gives a quick pre-approval on a Friday night or a thing like that. And obviously, sometimes it has to happen, but we like to do our due diligence and be really thorough with the process. So the realtor partners I have know, the ideal situation would be, hey, buyer looking to purchase, whether it's selling an existing property or first-time home buyer, give me a couple days. Let me build a relationship with them, because I'm also not somebody that just will send a link to somebody I've never met and be like, hey, give me all your personal information and just assume that I'm going to take care of you. So we have some introductory calls. We have some communications. We do a lot of goal setting. So just because they want to buy a house, especially if I take it back, even if they've purchased one, I guarantee you 90% of repeat home buyers don't remember the process from the first time. It's such a blur. It's stressful. It's crazy. So we really want to make sure that we establish the way they like to communicate, what their goals are. Of course, everybody wants the cheapest payment and the cheapest interest rate, but there's a lot that goes into it. And then actually going in and going so far as to trying to get them through underwriting prior to buying the house. So let's eliminate roadblocks. Let's get rid of some things that may pop up at the last minute. Let's try to keep closings happening on time. So yeah, I mean, it's such a close relationship with the realtor. And it's not just the buyer's agent, the listing agents I communicate with. I usually call when we're making pre-approvals, when we're making offers, when we're under contract, keeping them in the loop. Because if something happens, A lot of times it's a domino. So, we take it really seriously. If our closing gets pushed, it's not just an inconvenience to us. There may be three other families affected. The closing attorney's affected because they got to reschedule. The realtors are affected because a lot of times they have to coordinate. So, yeah, the communication between the realtor and the lender really is, to me, probably the most important part of the transaction.
Yeah.
Even if some things don't go smoothly, hey, let's talk about it. Let's get through this appraisal issue. Let's get through these repair requests. Let's get through whatever. So, yeah, we take a lot of pride in that process.
Yes. Well, that's wonderful to hear. So thank you for that. What drives your passion to consistently stay on the top 1% of mortgage originators nationwide?
Oh gosh, I don't know if that's a goal. The industry, it's a lot like real estate. The top 10%, the top 5% makes up 70% of the volume. So to be in the top 1%, we were lucky to do it last year. It's really not a goal we set. Our big goal is, consistent business, good transactions to grow our business and really to just take care. So to me, the big measure of success is when we get repeat clients, when we have people call me from 3 or 4 years ago, when we have realtors say, hey, you know, I was on the other side of the deal and you were great. I want you to help. That's more of our target. So the
Mm-hmm.
rankings don't mean as much, especially when you're considering Alabama, Jasper, these outlying areas, our loan amounts are a lot smaller. We can't compete in volume. We can
Right.
compete in units, but you can't control volume. So it's not really a goal to be in the 1%. It's an honor and it's great to know. But really, the goal is reputational here, being a go to lender and knowing that we perform well when it comes time.
Yes, that's wonderful. Let's talk about first time buyer basics. When guiding first time buyers, what is the biggest market misconception you have to clear up right away?
Oh gosh, 100% financing means no money to closing. That's a big one. You have to have 20% down. There's so much. And if you're in social media at all, you see all the clips, PMI and 100% financing. Really, to me, the bottom line, especially with first time home buyers, is there's a couple things that matter to them: monthly payment and what they have to bring to closing. Those are the things that you really got to clear up front. So we make utilization of a website called Mortgage Coach. And the beautiful part of that is we're able to put in very plain terms the transactions. So we don't send 15 what are called loan estimates, altas, however you want to call them, of tons of figures and numbers and stuff. Our big thing is we want to clear up the mystery. There's
Mm,
pretty set fees. We kind of know what to expect outside of a few things. So what we really thrive to do is take these first time home buyers that are completely wide eyed, have no idea. They were just generally told by somebody, you know, buying's cheaper than renting in a lot of cases. You need to buy a home. So, and they may have done a ton of research. So, a lot of times they come to us knowing you don't need 20% down. They come to us knowing PMI is not a terrible thing used properly. So, the big thing to us is just to ensure when it gets to closing, they don't get wide eyed and surprised.
mm-hmm.
We don't want to sit at that closing table and they're like, gosh, that's a lot more money than I thought, whether it's closing costs or monthly payment. So, the misconception part, we can beat like a dead horse. I think that's a really common theme and easy way to kind of get somebody's engagement and talk about those things. But to us, in my experience, a lot of times the first time home buyers are overwhelmed by stuff. And so you're not even clearing up misconceptions. You're just educating them from the ground up. You're letting them know, closing costs, how we handle closing costs. Because nowadays people don't have a ton of money to spend. So
Right.
how are we gonna find that money? Whether it's ask the seller to help contribute, whether it's a 401k withdrawal, which you're basically borrowing money from yourself, a gift from a family member. Heck, in Jasper and a lot of other places, I don't know how many boats and guns and things we've sold to raise money to get to the closing. So it's not necessarily the myths that's the challenge. It's the overcoming the hurdles that they're aware of already. Credit
Yes.
improvement, things like that. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I said myths to me that's a really common item that a lot of people have already covered. So what we try to do is just get around those things and really get down to the nuts and bolts of the process for them.
And just educate the buyer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The biggest hurdle we have in real estate or that I have is new young people first time home buyers thinking they're going to find a home that for 350 or less that's perfect.
Yep.
I have one new build under 200,000.
Yep.
And it looks like it's not pretty. I'll put it that way. It's beautiful inside. It has no curb appeal. And I've had people want to buy it, but I couldn't get with my seller quick enough. And so they gave me a timeline. I need to know in an hour or I have to buy this other house. I'm like, well,
Right.
if you want this one, then why have you got to know in an hour? Because, you know.
Well, everything's a deadline, right? Everybody
Yeah.
wants to know right away. And I will say that's a really important point. And that's something because a lot of times there's two ways that I normally get involved. Hey, I was talking to a family member, talking to a friend, whatever, referred them to you. So I get this person, they're like, I have no idea. I just want to buy a house. And we set the budget, we set the expectation, we set a price point. And that's a lot. I'm not going to say easier because unfortunately, to your exact point, a lot of my home buyers have a $250,000 limit, say, for instance. And they go out in the market, and what they're seeing that's affordable these days, especially if you want to get in a good school system or you want to get in specific areas, is a challenge. And so a lot of times they're taking on a home that perhaps needs a little work, that perhaps may not be exactly where they want it to be to start with, but they're starting the process to build the equity. They're starting the process of owning a home. So maybe it's a compromise there. Or the other end of that spectrum is I get somebody that's been on every listing on Zillow and like, I need to buy a $500,000 house and I make $8 an hour,
Yeah.
and so we have that challenge. But what I will say is we work with a lot of realtor partners, and I'm sure you're the same way, that does a great job of helping them with the compromise. It may not be that you may not have the in-ground swimming pool you want, but you know what? You got the fenced yard you need for the dog. So a lot of times it again gets back to the communication between the lender and the realtor, because there are several programs we utilize, whether it's first-time home buyers or not, that are very specific geographically. So USDA, for instance, it can literally divide a road. So it's not just if you're in Jefferson County, you qualify. There's roads in all these areas that, one house qualifies and you go two houses down and it doesn't. So there's a lot of communication in very specific geographic locations. We got to check the maps. And so, when it comes down to this compromise a bit, you've also got to factor those things in. Alabama Housing, their program, the FirstStep program, which is the lower interest rate, is the same way. It's geographically dictated. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a huge challenge to set the expectations. And especially, I think a lot of sellers right now might be putting houses on the market that, and right or wrong, maybe they think, I don't need to replace the carpet or paint the house because the buyers are going to come in and want to do it themselves. They
Right.
don't have to invest the money in it. And so the houses may not be as appealing as they would otherwise, or heaven forbid, the pictures look better than the actual house, which we all know
Right.
happens. Good
Right.
photographers can make anything look good.
Mhm.
But so, yeah, there's a lot of challenge with that. And price point makes a huge difference these days.
It really does.
Um, five or $10,000 could be the difference between closing costs and not. 20 or $30,000 can be the difference between a house in a neighborhood you're looking for and one that you have to settle on. So yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
that's that again. I mean, I can't say enough. That's the communication portion. That's an online pre-approval. Unfortunately, doesn't get you that local level of knowledge in the relationship that you do with a local lender to be able to have those conversations and kind of set the parameters.
Right. One of the things I have a problem with, I hate Zillow. And the reason I do is because, you know, so I have a home in a neighborhood that has two other homes for sale. They've both been remodeled and they put lipstick on the pig perfectly.
Mhm.
You know, they just did it real cheaply and made it
Oh yeah,
flashy and sexy. And they're half the size of my home, which was
right.
well constructed. It's been updated. It has beautiful hardwood floors throughout, not LVP, and they can't see the difference between
Mhm.
that one that is half the size that's been renovated and mine being twice the size of the home and but still set in 1990. You know, and I said, well, okay, I'm not your realtor, but if you'd go back in that other home and take a bag of marbles
Yes,
and drop them on the floor, see how many of them you could find.
that's right. See where they end up.
Yeah. And they all look at you like you're insane. They said, well, this one is so out of date. And I said, well, it really is not if you
Right.
compare, you know, what's done, because it has a new roof and it has a new HVAC and it has beautiful hardwood floors. You didn't get hardwood floors in that other home, you know.
Well, and it's a
And
lot more expensive to put hardwood floors in after the fact than it is to walk into them.
that's right. That's right. So anyway, I have that dilemma often, but it's because Zillow will put them on there and then I don't
Yeah.
know. I also have a
Well,
problem with Zillow and addresses. They can't they don't use the tax identification number to put the right
right.
address in, and it messes things up.
Well,
I,
we'll see that from time to time too, because it has to be U.S. Postal Service verified. So
yeah,
yeah, sometimes we'll see the addresses pop up, but I mean, that's the price you pay, and it's the same thing we have with online lenders. I get more phone calls. Rocket pre-approved me, and they
uh-huh,
pre-approved me at this ridiculously low interest rate, and I really compare it to a coat of paint, some LVP, and some refreshing and updating. It looks good on the outside, but what's really when you start digging in, what's the truth? It's a really similar challenge, and so online access, the internet, AI, all this stuff has its benefits, but I definitely think it's made our job harder over the years.
yeah, I do too. So What is the critical difference between a basic mortgage pre-approval and a conditional pre-approval or conditional approval when bidding on a home?
It's a great question. That's something that we really emphasize when we talk to our borrowers, because a lot of times they'll come to me perhaps already pre-approved or pre-qualified, which means you've given somebody basic information, you've shared your credit scores, social security number, date of birth, you've shared some employment information, et cetera. And so with mortgages, and it doesn't matter the company, we basically plug you into a system and we run you through some automated system, a desktop underwriter or whatever, and it gives us a finding. But you can manipulate those findings. So I can say you have a little more money than you do, or I can miscalculate your income. So a pre-approval or a pre-qualification is taking basic information, putting it through an automated system, and it just says, hey, you kind of meet the parameters. But the challenge with that is, and I'm going to use employment for an example, with anybody that's not salaried, anybody that's not got a fixed, stable income, whether it's Social Security, VA benefits, salary, whatever, if there's any variance to it, we get very particular. So if you work 35 hours a week, but you've only done it for 6 months, and prior to that, you didn't, well, that changes the whole approval. Or say you got a raise recently and we're trying to use the higher income to qualify you, but it's not supported by a paycheck or a pay stub, that's a pre-qualification. With a conditional approval, we do the digging. We collect pay stubs. We could contact the employer for verifications on things. We get 6 months of bank statements and make sure you don't have a ton of non-sufficient fund charges or big deposits that we can't explain because you had money in the backyard you deposited. We do the digging that sometimes is what leads to delays on closings, or sometimes that bad phone call the day before closing. Hey, the borrower didn't qualify and we can't move forward, because I know it's happened to most everybody. That conditional underwriting takes a lot of that off the table. So we verified income, we verified assets. An underwriter has placed their hands upon this file and done the due diligence. And so when you make an offer, when you go in, especially in a multiple offer situation, the only thing that's going to be stronger than it, in my opinion, is the cash offer, because taxes, title, income, title appraisal, and insurance is what we say. Those are the three things that are left because we've done all the verifications. So a lot of times with a savvy listing agent, if they get multiple offers, and sure, one may be higher, but it's a pre-qualification from an online lender. You got one that's a little lower, maybe asking for closing costs, but they've been underwritten. It's a local lender that can get you on the phone. It's somebody that can talk you through the offer. They've been vetted, as it were. It's almost like having a home inspection before you get the appraisal. You kind of know what you're walking into, so there's fewer surprises. So to us, it's something, given the opportunity, it only takes a couple more days to do. Our underwriters are great. They can, this is the last week of the month. They're a little crazy now, but generally a day or two longer, and we have what we need. And that way, even if there are challenges, we know what has to be done. We know how to tackle those challenges. Maybe we've got to get a pay stub before and after a pay raise last year to justify the income from last year and stuff. So to me, it's just peace of mind. It's like I said at the beginning, doing the heavy lifting on the front end, verifying, hey, you got an $8,000 cash deposit in your bank account, 45 days ago. We need to dig into that, because if we back it out, we don't have the money we need. Was it a sale of a car? Was it a gift from a family member? Was it a bonus? So that's, to us, you can close a little quicker. It's going to be a much more solid approval. You're much more certain going forward. So it's made the difference on a lot of offers for us, I believe, because it's just that peace of mind that the listing agent can tell their sellers, we're going to close. This isn't a, hey, we're on pins and needles to the underwriting's complete. We're not sure where that buyer is. That buyer has been taken care of. And the underwriter generates a letter. So their name, you see the underwriter who did the work, and they kind of put their stamp of approval on it to move forward. And it just makes a huge difference.
Yes. Yes, I'm sure. How can repeat buyers or current homeowners utilize 100% financing instead of just being for beginners?
Yep. So actually, tomorrow I have a closing, and the reason we were able to move forward is it was a young couple, and if they listen to podcasts, they may know I'm talking about them. But they had bought a house a while back and they outgrew it, so it was time for them to upsize. But they hadn't gained the equity in the home because they'd actually used the Alabama housing product to purchase it the first time. So 100, and actually Alabama housing allows you to go a little over 100% without getting into the guideline conversation. So they hadn't quite gained the equity in their home where they were going to net enough. And actually, I think they're actually maybe bringing a little bit to get out of that house, to sell that house. So they're in that same position where there's no funds, but they're solid income. They meet all the other boxes. And Alabama housing, and one of those myths, it's not a first-time homebuyer program. It is a affordability program. So Alabama housing does a great job of ensuring that interest rates are kept competitive and a lot of times lower than you would get without using the program. The fees aren't unattainable. There's oftentimes no higher fees than you would get with just a regular mortgage, but they also don't limit it to first time home buyers. So as long as you meet the income requirements and they're generous, literally we're going to sell a house, turn around, and an hour later buy a new house using that same program. So it's just one of those things. USDA is another one. You can't necessarily just say it's a first time home buyer program without the caveats being in there, without the understanding. VA is another one. Sometimes people think you use your VA benefits once and that's it. Alabama housing is a very similar thing. Like, it is not just for first time home buyers. It's just you have to know how to make it fit, how to make it work, and have the experience to be able to kind of navigate in this circumstance. How much are you having to come out of pocket to sell your house? We're going to deduct that. That's a cost. And do you have the money to pay whatever closing costs are left on the new one? So yeah, it's something we've used several times in Alabama housing. It's not a loophole. They support it, and it's something that they're aware as a tool that we're able to use just because affordability is such a challenge right now.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because for my own knowledge, I guess, or lack of knowledge on Alabama housing. So is it just limited to certain areas, kind of like, well, USDA covers all of Walker County, but
Right.
does Alabama housing do the same, or is it just limited areas?
So there's two programs within Alabama housing, and it's FirstStep and StepUp. FirstStep's the lower interest rate, the bond program. StepUp is the regular program, if you will. And those programs, within each of those programs, you can do conventional, FHA, USDA, or VA. So it's really, they're facilitating a second mortgage that covers your down payment. Or in the case of USDA and VA, you can actually get money for closing costs. So within those two, StepUp has no geographic restrictions. As long as you meet the income requirements, anywhere in the state's good. FirstStep has geographic requirements, but if you're not in what's considered a targeted area, it doesn't exclude you from using the program. It just means it's a little more restrictive on the income. So it's almost the reverse, and it's not quite that simple. Almost the reverse of USDA. If you're in a targeted area, it's generally a little more populous without being too specific. So it means the income requirements are a little easier. You can make a little more money. Whereas the non-targeted area, Walker County can be one of them, you're just a little more restricted on the income because they're all going, when you talk about like USDA, conventional, Alabama housing, all these programs have income requirements because what they don't want to do is they're not trying to facilitate somebody that makes $500,000 to buy a home with no money down. There's an expectation they're going to be able to have the capacity to save up a down payment. What they're trying to do is help the people that are just 90% of the population working a job that pays median income, maybe slightly above, to be able to purchase a home. So to answer your question, none of the programs with Alabama housing excludes you geographically the way USDA might. There's just some restrictions on one of them.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I've got a client in mind I need to send you.
And we can take care of it. Absolutely.
She's somebody I love, so it's my daughter. So
Good. Well, that
Yeah.
is a huge referral and a vote of confidence. So we'll make sure to take good care of her.
Yeah, appreciate that. As a top lender for the AHFA StepUp program, how do these options strengthen our local housing market?
Well, what it does is it puts more buyers that can purchase in the market. So if you were to take that option off the table, and for a long time, that wasn't an option. They haven't been around forever. You're probably taking, in my business, 30% of your buyers off the table. So, and it's not the number of buyers you're taking off the table, it's the type of buyer you're taking off the table. You're taking a lot of these young professionals that maybe you're just getting their feet under them, that are starting a family, that just don't have the funds to save up even a 3.5% down payment. Because again, houses aren't cheap. And then
And
be able to
rent's
pay closing
ridiculous.
costs. And by the time you pay your first and last month's rent, your security deposit and everything, a lot of times you're in the same boat. So, and that's kind of the thing. A lot of times people find with Alabama housing, and USDA can accomplish something similar, and so does VA, but Alabama housing specifically, they can facilitate these people that can't necessarily even afford to rent because they don't have $5,000 in cash to put down for first and last month's rent and an application fee and all this other stuff. With a savvy agent and a lender that knows what they're doing, we can eliminate the upfront aspect. And so to me, it's not that it's a percentage of the market that you're eliminating. It's the percentage, what makes up that percentage, that's the big deal. You're taking out people that really need this opportunity to be a homeowner, that really need the foothold to get established in a community. Employers know when their employees own homes, they're more likely to stay on the job. And neighborhoods know when somebody owns a home, they're more likely to take better care of that home. So it's such a far-reaching thing. And when you're a homeowner, you spend more money. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. So you're supporting Home Depot and economies and stuff. That's why when COVID hit, they were so quick to reduce interest rates to keep activity going. So what we're doing with this product again is I think strengthening communities as a whole because you're introducing owners instead of renters and you're keeping the market strong. And obviously you're helping, builders and contractors and stuff put more homes on the ground, which is what we need. So if you take away 30% of the buyers, how would that affect the market as a whole right now? And so, like I said, it's a huge tool for us. And every state generally has a similar program. And I think that the people that run the programs, the people that facilitate the programs know without products and programs like this, you're really restricting more than just the buyers. You're hurting a lot more than that in the long run.
Right, right. You're killing the economy as a whole. Excuse
I,
me.
we're biased, but that's what I say is, without homeowners, you're really affecting a lot of different businesses and things. So, yeah, that's kind of how we look at it.
I don't know that in other areas of the state necessarily realize how, when the coal business was targeted for a while, how that really affected our region.
Yes.
Car sales and home sales and everything. We had restaurants go under. Everybody was affected.
When you take the money out of the community, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And when I moved here, I've only been in Jasper 30 years, so
only
only 30, only a lifetime. I'm only 31.
I was gonna say you look great for being there 30 years. You're just barely getting started.
Yeah. Anyway, when I first moved here, everybody had a new car except us.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking, well, why does everybody drive around in a new car? Well, they were all making great money as coal miners. And then
absolutely.
And now you see everybody driving around in a beater.
Well, and it's the results of the economy. And you look at Warrior Met and some of those mines that are coming on offline. Take U.S. Steel, for example. I worked out there for a brief period of time. That business built the city of Birmingham and it dictated housing. All these neighborhoods and areas were built because of U.S. Steel. And at one point, they were the largest employer in the state. And so you take those jobs away, and then you see the neighborhoods start to decline because people can no longer afford homes. They don't have jobs anymore, and they relocated. So again, it's all interconnected, and home ownership's the linchpin for a lot of that.
That's right. That's right. Why is let's talk about finding the right lender. Why is the interest rate not always the best metric for choosing a lender in a real estate transaction?
So that's an interesting question. And a lot of it we boil down, and I referred to it early on in the conversation. We use this website called Mortgage Coach. It does side-by-side comparisons of products. So you can do a conventional FHA, whatever. Interest rate only makes up a portion of the payment. And when you really look at it, percentages of rate are fractions of payments. So a quarter in rate, especially in a smaller loan amount, doesn't make up a big difference. But what's the cost of the rate? And so if you're getting a comparison on two loans from two different lenders, and I'm quoting you 6.5%, you're like, oh, that's really high. Historically, it's not. And another lender is offering you 5.99%. Well, that's a 0.5% in rate difference, but they have to get to that rate somehow. So a lot of times they charge origination, discount, whatever you want to call it. So there's a fee, there's a cost to it. And a lot of times, if you go look online, so say you go to wellsfargo.com and type in today's interest rate, and it pulled up a chart of rates. And that's what most people compare us to. Well, I looked at the internet today and rates are 5.99%. They're not currently, they're in the mid sixes. Well, yeah, but if you look at the fine print, that's with high credit, that's with a large down payment, and that's with a buy down. That's with paying money to get to the rate. And so it's like anything else. You're either going to pay for it up front or you're going to pay for it long term. In the case of a lot of our buyers, a higher rate may be more tenable because they can come up with $40 more a month than the other $2,000 it costs to get the cheaper interest rate. Or FHA versus conventional versus USD, all those rates are different. So I just tell people, and it's not a sales pitch, but I'm like, you've got to have the full picture. So if all you're doing is looking at interest rate, are you looking at mortgage insurance? Because while FHA's rates can be a lot cheaper than conventional, it's always going to have mortgage insurance. And on a larger loan, it's a bigger number. So when you put it side by side with conventional, does that make a lot of sense? So, and it's not a way for me to be able to sell a higher interest rate. That's not what we do. What it is for me is, and I mentioned earlier in the conversation, homeowners generally, when you boil it down to two things, the things they care about is their monthly payment and their cash to close. Well, again, monthly payment could be lower, but if you're paying a lot more cash to close, doesn't make a lot of sense. So rate's just a part of the equation. And it's our job as lenders to be able to show them. And I am not a lender that's into, I'm going to bedazzle you with my knowledge and I'm going to spew a bunch of numbers at you so you think I'm really smart. I want to boil it down to where it makes sense to you. And I'm not saying, I'm not talking down to people, but that website's great because they can get off the phone with me and have a conversation with their spouse or their parents or their trusted advisor and look at the numbers side by side. And the rate doesn't tell that story alone. You have to look at all the things that go into it.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's a great plan. What unseen lender communication skills make the biggest difference in getting a buyer to the closing table smoothly?
So, unseen skills. So I'm going to take it from the perspective of a buyer, and you can attest and probably tell better stories than I can. If only they knew the conversations lenders and realtors had after hours, offline, when things pop up. We don't want to overwhelm them. So a lot of times the underwriter may come to me with a condition and it's something that's a little squirrely. We'll do a bunch of digging and stuff without calling the buyer and freaking them out. Or maybe at the last minute, the termite inspection is going to be done late and we have to scramble to get it done. It's not our job to, and I look at this two ways. It's not our job to freak the buyer out at every corner. It's kind of like you do with your kids. You don't tell them everything. You tell them what they need to know. And it's same with a first-time home buyer. There's a lot of hand-holding. And if they knew every time my eyes got wide when I got a text message or an email from a realtor or a lender, or there was a problem, or halfway through the process, the buyer's getting cold feet because, there's a house that showed up 6 blocks down the road that they think they like better and they want to back out. I'm not immediately calling everybody and saying, oh my God, the deal's dead. So there's a lot of behind the scenes communication with the title company. Say, as you know, with title search, you mentioned earlier, you've done all these kind of things. Names are common, and we might get a title search with $10,000 of judgments and liens on this property. Well, I don't call the buyer and say, hey, guess what? You got to have $10,000. We verify it. We give them Social Security, the last four of the Social Security number. They go to the courthouse and they verify it. We don't raise red flags and sirens every time something pops up, but we're always upfront and communicating with the realtors, both sides. So if something pops up at the last minute, if the appraiser can't get out to the property in time, I'm not calling and telling everybody every detail, but we do communicate and we do make sure all the important people are in the loop. A closing package may be late to get out the last day of the month because everything is so crazy. And we're doing singing and dancing and we're communicating and we're sitting in the closing room talking and cutting up and playing with the kids while we're all on our phones off to the side, making sure things go smoothly. So there's a lot of communication that happens behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see.
Right.
And not that we want to make ourselves look more important or busier than we are, but again, and it's with any job. I think anybody you talk to, if people saw what actually went into doing that job, they would never want to do it. And I think a lot of people, especially in real estate, don't realize it's not just making podcasts, showing pretty houses, and collecting a check at closing.
Right.
It's a full-time job, and there's all these things that happen behind the scenes. I've had realtors show up to closing that were dirty because they had to get under the house and turn the water off or something, and there's cobwebs in their hair. It's a lot more to it than that, but we don't need to bother everybody with those things if it can be taken care of behind the scenes. So I think that's probably, the unseen communication you're referring to.
Yeah, there really is a lot of that. And I call that last week of the month Hell Week.
I'm telling you, it is stressful, but this week, we've got 4 closings tomorrow, and thank the Lord, they're all set up and ready to go and good, and everybody's calm. But yeah, there's a lot of frantic happening this time of the month, and it's our job to kind of keep everything going and work together as a group and make sure everybody gets to that closing table happy and not stressed out and crying. So yeah, Hell Week's a good way to put it.
Yeah. When I get one where I've had to push it on my closing attorneys, I'm like, look, we've got to do it today. They cannot get an extension. Their job requires them to move this week or whatever. Then I'll take them lunch. I'm like, I'm doing this so y'all can work through lunch to get this done, and I'm sorry for that, but I do love and appreciate you getting this closed. So
they're usually the ones that get the brunt of it because they have to sit at that table and execute the documents and stuff. And I've had several phone calls after the fact apologizing. We made it through it. Everybody was a little stressed out. It's the second day of the month and we got time to catch our breath, and sorry we kind of did that. But those things happen. I mean, that's the bad part. I mean, if it was all easy transactions and smooth, there'd be thousands of realtors and lenders all making a little bit of money. But the problem solving and the triage is the biggest part of what makes a good person in this industry.
Yes, it is. Let's talk about VA loans, navigating a VA loan. What are the most common misunderstandings that both buyers and listing agents have about VA loans?
So there's a couple that come up time and time again. One, and it's the one I hear even these days a lot, is they're hesitant to accept the VA offer because the appraisal is going to be more difficult. The house is going to come in under, the appraiser is going to chop it to pieces. VA appraisals are difficult. While VA may have some out of the box criteria sometimes. We typically don't find that we lose deals to appraisals on VA loans. So again, communication. I've had one where, and VA appraisers tend to be an older generation. I don't see as many young VA appraisers coming down the pipe as we see the older guys, and the ones I've worked with for years. And they're like any other, like, as I get older, that tree looks pretty dead. We got to do, like, they're particular, and they want to make sure the house is safe, and they want to make sure the homeowner is safe. And so they may be a little more particular, but I don't see problems. And without getting too deep into it, like, the process if a VA appraisal comes in short is different than a regular appraisal. Like, we'll get a regular appraisal, it comes in short, we get the report, we're $500, $5,000 short, we communicate, send some comps in, we work it out. VA tends to be a little more difficult. It's just like any other government thing where it's short, you don't know how much, and if the impetus is on us to provide documentation in the form of comparables to support what we think's right, in the hopes that that's different than what they use. So you'll hear Tidewater. That's what it's called. It's not impossible. I don't know that I've had a deal that we've had it that we haven't been able to close. But to me, that's the big one is, being reluctant to accept an offer on a VA buyer. And I'm very passionate about VA. I feel that is a benefit that is earned. A lot of my family are veterans, my brother, father, uncle, cousin that served. And so that's something that they've earned, that they should be able to use without fear of missing out on their home. But that also leads into not everybody that served qualifies. So that's something I see all the time on commercials and ads. If you served, you can have a VA loan. No, that's not true. And so there is a very lengthy, criteria, whether you served overseas, whether you're reserves, all these things to determine whether or not you qualify for a VA loan. And that's one of my pet peeves is when I get either somebody that gets sent to me by a realtor that was qualified by one of the big VA online lenders and says, hey, they got a VA deal, but I want to make sure they're getting the best one. And we can go to the VA website and pull a document called their certificate of eligibility in about 30 seconds that tells us if they have VA benefits. That tells us if they're current. That tells us maybe they had VA benefits, but they defaulted on that loan and they're no longer eligible to use them. We do that up front. That is, to me, probably just as important as checking the credit to make sure they qualify, is we verify that those benefits are available. So two of the big ones being the appraisal and that. And then the last one that we see time and time again is the restrictions upon being able to use your VA loan multiple times. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have talked to me in the past are like, I used my VA loan already, so I can't use it again. Not true. It is actually very easy to sell a home with a VA existing loan, close that loan, and you can turn around the same day and buy another home with those same VA benefits. They can get restored the same day. And also, you can have multiple loans with a VA loan. It's something called bonus entitlement. Alabama, it's, I think, $144,000 and up. You can do 100% financing again while maintaining a current VA mortgage. You just have to justify things. You have to qualify and budget. They're particular about it. But VA is very lenient when it comes to accessing those benefits. And so, a lot of it's due diligence, a lot of it's some research. VA, much like FHA and USDA, has a fee, an additional fee. It's called a funding fee that they charge that a lot of people are exempt from. And so when you're talking between 2.3 and 3.5% of the purchase price or the loan amount being added to your loan, it's important the lender verifies if that's accurate or not. That can make a big difference in your payment. Mm-hmm. So really, it just comes down to working with lenders that know the guidelines and knows how to navigate the VA loans to overcome these hurdles that have been placed. And so those are really my big kind of myths or roadblocks when it comes to VA. And it's something that's, if done properly and done, up front, usually isn't an issue. And so it's something we love to do. We get a lot of VA referrals.
Well, that's wonderful. And thank you for all of that explanation, because some of that I've never been privy to, And I work with more as a listing agent. And
sure.
The biggest hurdle I've had because I'll make sure the home's ready as far as I can tell to sell. I always advise my clients to get an inspection beforehand. That doesn't always happen because they don't want to spend the $400 to do it,
Yep.
But send somebody through. Let's look at what things we know need to be done. If it hasn't been rewired in the last 60 years,
right.
You might need that.
Absolutely.
But the biggest hurdle I think I've had is not understanding or not knowing how much, like with these big online lenders, not telling you their closing fees are so much higher than say yours are. And then
Absolutely.
they want to put those closing fees on the seller, and I'll have estimated, okay, it's going to be about 8,000 and whatever. And it comes in at 16,
Absolutely. And that's where I was getting to. The rate doesn't tell the whole story. You're exactly right. And we see it all the time. So we work really hard, especially with our buyers, to provide them as accurate a sheet as possible of all the expected closing costs. So we go and look, is the house on septic or sewer? Do we have an HOA that we have to account for? Because we want to capture as many of those fees up front, to your exact point, because does it make sense for us to ask for $10,000 on a, $350,000 house if we only need six, and vice versa? If we need 10, asking for six doesn't make sense. And that's something we see a lot of, is misrepresentation of closing costs. I mean, in Alabama alone, not just the state, but in the central part of Alabama, you know, some counties split the closing fee for the attorney and the title insurance, some don't, and it's standard practice. And so knowing that could be $1,000 swing in closing costs. And when you ask for closing costs, there's two contracts floating around right now. They both treat it differently. And so, yeah, I mean, knowing those details and knowing that information as a listing agent, you don't want to get to the closing table and have to concede $2,000 just to close the deal because the lender or the other realtor didn't account for certain fees. And you don't want to leave money on the table. We don't want to ask for a bunch of money that's not needed. So yeah, you've nailed it on the head. And we do a lot of work to ensure that we're providing accurate estimates to our buyers so they can accurately negotiate if they need seller assistance on closing costs.
Yeah, well, good. Thank you. Well, Jonathan, it has been wonderful to be educated by you today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. This is No Excuses with Deanna Parrish. Be sure to tune in to the next episode for more real estate insights right here in Jasper and across Alabama.